Luckily, Angela was not very hard to find after asking Gavi where she was. She had apparently sequestered herself in a part of the Medi Center by her cabin and was actively doing something. David was a bit hesitant as he walked in. Angela was in her uniform and lab coat, studying something on her terminal, however. She looked over, and her face gave way to excitement, but not at David, but at Alaris. "Perfect. Can I run some tests?" Angela said as she hopped off her seat and rushed over to Alaris, pure unbridled enthusiasm washing off her face and voice. I guess?" Alaris asked, a bit unsure of what to say. However, Angela took it as a confirmation and pulled Alaris into a chair and found a bioscanner, and was very actively scanning just Alaris's core, before finally speaking, "Great, because I think that the doctors that ran your earlier test misread the results, not to a dangerous level, but I think it is mainly because they don't fully understand the human reproductive process," she said, before walking back over to her terminal and read the readout the scan got. Angela, however, started making all the sounds a human can make as they start reading something interesting, all of which cause Alaris to grow more concerned by each one, as her face shifted a bit close to panicked fear after each, something David saw. "Angela, can you please put Alaris's mind at ease?" David asked. "Oh, what shit. Sorry. It's just that the reads at first glance do coincide with human growth, but if you pay a bit more attention, you can see that it is faster," Angela said after she had turned back around. "Wait, so I'll be giving birth in 6 months?" Alaris asked, a bit surprised. "What, no, more like 7.5-ish. I don't know for sure, but the child is growing faster than a human but slower than a Xandraphane. It is in this weird spot where they aren't sure which way to grow," Angela said with a shrug, before suddenly punching David hard in the arm. "Also, I told you to wait a week, but no. You have to have every goddess-damn doctor running up to me asking every question under the sun about humans. You dickhead. Do you know how many had asked me if we are able to impregnate other races? The Lithrani doctors are genuinely interested in an unsettling degree. And then there are some Vishtani nurses that have asked me very pointed questions in Gaia's name. And then there are the new rounds of medical question about if I could gather samples from the women from our team to test things with the xenobiology department." David smiled at Alaris to let her know he was fine during Angela's tirade before he finally spoke. "Yes. Well, she is the one I love, and when she asked me, I didn't want to say no. That aside, I actually came to ask you something." Angela stopped getting ready for a new round of insults and cocked her eyebrow, a clear waiting for him to say what he wants. "I was wondering if there is a way to give me pupils, like a contact lens or cybernetics," David asked slowly. "Well, this ship doesn't have the facilities to do that. The Scythe will, though I don't think cybernetics is a good option. The Scythe will have the ability to make contacts that track your iris's position. I'll send over a feeler, see what I can drum up. Not sure if they will do anything, though. They aren't a hospital ship, but I'll point out you are a vet. Hopefully, I can find someone that can help," Angela said as she started typing up something on her terminal. "Out of a need to be sure, Green. Yeah?" "Yeah," David said as he offered Alaris a hand. "But I don't want my eyes back. I just want something that can be a visual cue to where I am looking, like a ring where my iris is. I can see what I can do, but I make no promises," Angela said slowly, then turned back to Alaris. "Can you come back in 2 weeks? I'd like to keep track of your progress." "Yeah, I'd like that," Alaris said with a smile after a second of thought. "Right, well, keep me updated, please. Thanks, Angela," David said with a smile. "I am still mad at you, but sure, I'll see what I can pull. It may have to wait until the hospital ships arrive." She scorned David before turning back to her terminal. As David and Alaris left, she held onto his arm a bit and held him back. "What did you ask for exactly?" she asked slowly, her face showing her confusion at the subject of his request. "Oh, well, I asked if there is a way to allow others to see where I am looking or read my emotions by seeing my irises so I can stop wearing this visor," David said with a smile. Her eyes show a slow understanding of his words before they show a desire to ask him not to, held back by her care and love of him. "You don't want me to, do you?" David asked as he fully turned to her. "I like that I can see you, and I want that to stay. It makes you mine alone, but I know I can't ask you to do that. It would be selfish of me, she said as she shifted her gaze from him. I don't want others to be able to see your heart. I want you to be mine and mine alone. Her voice carried a fear, one of loss and grief. I will always be yours, David said as he pulled her into a gentle hug. And this is not because I want to. I too love that you are able to see my heart. And as much as I wish for that to be true forever, I have duties, ones that need others to not fear me. He carefully raises her head and eyes to his, before raising his visor, pouring all the love and understanding he had for her wash over his face. But it will not change how I feel for you. You are my Zanno, and no one will ever take me away from you. His voice was a lullaby to her mind, a gentle love song of 1,000 nights. Findra David. She leaned in and kissed him before rearing back. I love you. I love you too, he said, and gave her a second kiss before he pulled away. Come on, I am hungry, and I think the mess hall should be open. As David walked in with Alaris, he was hoping that there would not be too many there, but Gaia wasn't kind to him now as the room was partly full of different omnivores, including the humans that didn't take major injuries. All eyes locked on him, and a dreadful silence lingered for a few seconds before a thump sounded from the back, followed by a second one made by 2 fists landing on tabletops, then a third and fourth. Before long, the hall was filled with thunderous booms of near 100 people acknowledge his efforts, a grand display of understanding of his role in the whole ordeal they had undertaken. David let them have a second or two to let the energy out, then raised his hand to quiet the thunder. Thank you all, but I had a small role to play, each of you, whether you were up here handling the shuttles in the Medi-Centers tending to the injured or down there fighting, you all made this happen. Our victory was but a dream in my mind. But your bravery and courage to push and fight is what made it a reality. So thank you all for believing in me. I couldn't have done this without you. David didn't wait too long and reached the back of the line for those getting their first plate or some getting seconds. He felt Alaris holding tightly to his hand, her face scanning the crowd before she turned back to face him. David, go sit down. I'll get our food. She said her voice was a bit hesitant. Something she wanted to do for him, but her hand was tight, and her strength gave away her uncertainty about her decision. In her culture, a male would never be served by his matriarch. If she ever did, it meant she cares for him over herself. A show that on Earth would be seen as a caring partner would be seen in her world as she is subservient to him. An act she could not undo among her kind, one that would destroy her control over the pack. Her desire to care for him was a true one in her eyes, a sight David loved, but an act that he would never agree to. No, we will sit down together, but we will sit among my people, okay? David asked back, his hand closing a bit tight around hers, his face giving deepening compassion to her inner turmoil. Her face showed a slight anger at his refusal, but nodded with happiness after a second, among his kind. Her desire to keep him close wouldn't be misread as her submitting to him. Yeah, I want to know your pack better, too, she said as she quickly kissed him and then pushed him up the line. They luckily didn't take too long, and while some of Alaris's pack made room for her, she had led the 2 of them over to a table where Hearth, Samantha, and Emmy were sitting, much to everyone's surprise, and David's joy. Hey guys, Alaris wants to eat with us today, okay? David said to get them to make a bit more room for both to sit down, causing Hearth to shift over and Samantha to slide into a new seat. Thanks guys, Zannoe. David pulled a seat out for Alaris after he placed his plate down. Alaris sat down with the grace of her kind and smiled wide to the company, causing all 3 to smile wide back. Thank you for letting me eat with you. I do have a question, Alaris said in a careful and measured tone, as David found his seat next to her, dodging her tail as she swung it in excitement. Oh, well, we may have an answer, Samantha said back, a bit of nervousness in her voice, likely because she scored the lowest on the test for cultural exchange between the 4 of them. Do all humans burn their food? Alaris said as she looked at each of their plates, while the 4 of them looked at her still somewhat raw steak, and they all looked at David. We don't burn, not much. We cook our food to allow it to be processed better, and we also add things to make it taste better. David said, as he cut his open and showed the lightly pink inside of his. If you want, you can try some of mine. Sure, I'll try, she said, and patiently waited for him to cut her a piece, which she stared at for a second before sniffing it. Did you put peppers on this? She looked at him. Yeah, David is a stickler for his mama's cooking, Hirth said as he curiously watched Alaris. His mama put peppers on meat to give them a kick. Can you not eat peppers? Emmy said, noticing Alaris's hesitation. No, we can, but we don't really like them. We have strong senses, so they can be overwhelming, Alaris said back, as she eyed the piece of meat carefully. Well, David uses his own stock, so there shouldn't be a lot. He has to ration it out, Samantha said, and shot a glance to David. How much did you put on this time? Barely any. I'm surprised she could smell them, David said slowly. But if you want, I can get you something to wash it down with. Can you have milk? No need. It's okay. There isn't a lot, and I think I can handle it, Alaris said, before biting the whole thing off her fork. And after a bit of chewing, her face lit up with joy. Her ears pointed straight up along with her tail, and a slight moan of happiness escaped through her mouth as she ate the food before swallowing. Wow, that is good, she said after a second, and looked down at her meal, a contemplative visage taking hold. Now I kind of wish I knew about this. My people only cook meats from poisonous beasts or plants. David watched her for a second and stood while grabbing her plate. I'll be right back, he said as he fetched a new pepper packet from his breast pocket and headed over to the cooking station. Leaving the four to watch him, a stunned look on all, although for different reasons, but he didn't care. He got to work changing her meal into a cooked meal. He used all of what she had. Luckily, he was familiar with all the ingredients, and finished in a few minutes, with a care that he would normally reserve for his own meal, a notion that he hadn't even thought about as he came back over to the table. Holy shit, David, did you just cook for her? Samantha asked with genuine surprise. Yeah, so she liked my food, so I did the same to hers so she can enjoy her meal, David said in a nonchalant manner. David, you don't cook for others, Emmy said slowly, and then to add to her point, she gestured at David's closest friend. Even for Hirth. Yeah, I've known you for the better part of 8 years, and you have never cooked a thing for me. Hirth jumped on Emmy's cue, his face showing stunned but not hurt feelings. Did I do something wrong? Alaris stopped short of her first bite. Her face showed a fear of being ostracized. No, my Zanno, they are all forgetting something. David placed a hand on her shoulder to reassure her. You are my wife, and so the only person I'd happily cook for, if they had any brain cells, they would have forced me to cook for them, he said, and intently gazed at each of them. Besides, they wouldn't like my cooking like you. Causing the three of them to shift their eyes to Alaris, glints of plans forming in their heads, and Hirth was the fastest. So, Alaris, would you like to try my food? I'll give you some if I can get some of yours. Hirth said slowly, his voice carrying a clear desire to have her food over sharing his, but Alaris turned to David, looking for approval. They want to try my cooking. I wouldn't be upset if you let them, but I did make that for you, so it's your call, David said calmly, his face giving her a careful reassurance of his feelings on the matter. Alaris looked down at her food for a second, then up to the three of them. Sorry, maybe next time I'm excited to try his cooking in full, she said with a gentle smile, making the three let out sighs of defeat, before she took a bite and didn't hesitate at making her enjoyment of the food audible. So, David, what is the plan now? We're going to stay here until the fleet from Earth gets here, right? Emmy asked, as she took a bite from her food. Yeah, about 3 or 4 more days. My brain is still recovering from the sleep deprivation, David said back as he took a drink of his water. I'll have to jump ship at one point for a second, but no guarantees. So, you said she is your wife, but you guys didn't have a wedding or anything, so what's the deal? Hirth asked after watching Alaris take a second bite. Oh, well, it's more based on her cultural understanding on that front, David said carefully. Alaris, would you like to tell them why? Alaris's ears twitch at her name, but she stopped eating and took a sip of water before looking back to her food and cutting it up while she spoke. Oh, well, that would be because we cemented our union, and in 7-ish months we will both be parents, Alaris said, causing all three to freeze at her words. However, She was oblivious to it and continued, "It's common among my people, but I think I'll be taking as much interest in this one as I did Kaiga." She paused for a second and turned to David from her food, "But I think we should talk about that later. I want to know if you want to be more involved in their lives. Then my people's customs dictate and—" Her face shifted to a ping of anger at the sight of David holding back laughter. "What's so funny?" "My Zan Noe," David said as he pointed out of her line of sight, and her eyes fell on the stunned faces of the 3 other humans at their table. The 3 of them were watching the 2 with an expression of stunned befuddlement at what they heard. Their eyes showed a slowly updating information before Emmy seemed to absorb the news fastest. "Holy shit, congratulations!" she screeched at the 2 of them. "Wait, how the hell is that possible?" "Ask Hans," David quickly answered. "Wait, so you 2 are actually having a kid like she is pregnant right now?" Samantha asked slowly. "Yes, I am. I am confused, David," Alaris said. But before David could explain, Hearth's mind woke up. "David," he roared loud, "you got her pregnant before you had a wedding?" He leaned over the table and stuck his finger in David's face. "Your mother will never forgive me. You better set this right before she brings that child into this world." "I fully intend to. I was going to talk to her about it tonight, you giant moron. Now sit back down," David said carefully before turning to Alaris. But he was stunned at the panicked look on Alaris's face. "Your nose Shahs will be angered by our child," she said in a shaky voice, fear creeping in at some taboo they had done. "No, Maizano, it's that humans have a cultural ceremony for the union of a couple before they have children." David started explaining before adding more at the tears in the corner of her eyes. "Hearth is over-exaggerating. My mother would be happy for us. But she did always want me to get married." "So she wouldn't be angry," Alaris said slowly, her mind still shaken by Hearth's words, something that got him 2 swift kicks from Emmy and Samantha respectively. "No, she wouldn't. Out of anything, she would ask us to get married just so she could brag about it. She would have loved you. Don't worry about it," David said, as he shifted to turn completely to her and pulled her closer. "You are everything she would have ever asked for in a daughter-in-law. You are kind and compassionate. You love deeply, and you care about family very much." He hugged her and stroked her hair while he gave Hearth an angry face demanding he retracted his remarks. "Shit. Sorry, Alaris, I wasn't thinking, but David is right. His mother would love you. Look, I went overboard," Hearth said slowly and patted her back. "I didn't mean to upset you." Alaris let a soft sniffle go in David's arms before breaking away while wiping away tears. "Fander David, if it would have mattered to your mother, you could have told me. I would have waited," she said with a smile, a true one to comfort him. "To be fair, though, she would have still had me run down the path we took. She would be afraid you may run away when you see how stupid I can be," David said with an equal smile for her. "I was actually going to talk to you about it later. It is something I would want us to do, and I know that there are some cultural differences, but we can work around those." Alaris studied his face for a few seconds and nodded. "Yeah, okay. Let's talk about it tonight," she said as she pulled more away and back to her seat before smiling at the food on her plate. "I think I understand what you meant earlier about the one you'd happily cook for now more." She took a new piece and pointed it at Hearth. "I am never letting you have his cooking." She ate the bite she had on her fork. "Ha! Serves you right, Hearth," Samantha said with a grin. "Don't worry, Hearth, she may forgive you." "One day?" Emmy said in a tone that conveyed that no one would believe she would. "Well, I guess it's back to trying to get some of his cooking some other way. Hey, David, if I seduced you, would you cook for me then?" Hearth said with a forced wink. "Sorry, Hearth, you aren't my type," David said back, causing the table to let out a bit of a laugh. They ate for a bit, each enjoying their food before Alaris's mind grew a new question. "I do have a question that all of you could answer, I think," she said carefully. Whatever the subject was about seemed to be one she wanted an answer to. "Shoot, I think of you as a sister now, so I'll be happy to help," Emmy said. "I was wondering why you fought so hard not to just unleash that force from the beginning," Alaris said slowly and glanced from one human to the next. However, all of them had come to a stop. "We don't like that way of life," Emmy started. "We can be that harsh and brutal, but after the 3 wars before we joined the council, we don't like that side anymore. So many of us died, and most didn't even want to fight. Our history is marred in blood, and while we can't change that, we want our time in the stars to be different." "I don't know if that makes sense," she said, as she forced her hands together and pressed her thumbs against each other, her discomfort at the subject matter visible on her face. "Sorry, Alaris, most people in our generation didn't get to meet would-be family because of our history, but her thoughts on the matter are about the same for almost every human. We can be remorseless, but we don't want to be. Nowadays, we see the use of such extreme violence as a last resort." David added, "I am sorry, Emmy. I didn't want to upset you with the question, but I am happy you answered it. You have shown that your people have really understood their past, and while it is haunting to see, I am happy to call you sister too." Alaris said and beamed a smile at Emmy, a genuine hope that her turmoil would be soothed by her declaration. "Now I would be excited if you showed me what your favorite dessert is." Emmy watched Alaris for a second as she rebottled her thoughts on humanity and smiled wide. "Yeah, come on, let's see what they got today," she said as she rose and walked over to Alaris, both of them heading off to join the line again. "David, why is she asking that?" Samantha asked as they got out of earshot. "I had passed out shortly after the scythe had arrived. She was in command when the deadline came," David said as he stabbed at his food, his appetite gone as his mind conjured thoughts of what had unfolded before he made them audible. "What did happen?" Hearth shifted a bit. "Emberheart said we should run and tell Terra that the Empire is coming, and he would rather die a martyr on that world than surrender to traitors and heretics. The Admiral ordered us to wipe them out, so we did. Old training taking over, you know. We were so efficient that there weren't even bodies left to bury," Hearth said slowly. David looked at Samantha only to see her make a gesture with her hand like a blowing breeze taking away dust. "That bad, huh?" David said at her, and she nodded back. David looked over his shoulder at Alaris talking with Emmy and just watched them for a second before turning back to the two. "I need you two to do me a favor, the only one I'll ever ask," David said after a second. "Sure thing," Hearth said instantly. "As long as the mission is complete, I'll be happy to," Samantha added. "I need you both to submit paperwork to have Alaris acknowledged as my spouse and benefactor in the event of my death, as soon as you get to Earth." "Please," David said carefully. His hand pressed hard together, fingers interlaced, knuckles shifting a lighter color at the force he was imparting. "That way, no matter what happens after the mission, she and my child will be looked after." The two teammates exchanged a look, then turned back to David and nodded. They understood the true meaning of his request and the reason behind it, a grim stoicism of their friend's potential fate.